2018, when I founded Youth Force, our main objective was to go to villages and teach children English, as well as to create a bond with the children in the villages of Sri Lanka.
English, being an international language, is the key to being a part of the modern world.
We may be thorough with our English, but there are so many children out there who have no basic knowledge of their ABCs. We must be considerate. Those books were only written for us.
අද ලංකාවේ තියෙන භාෂාවලින් ඉංග්‍රීසි කියන්නේ වැදගත් භාෂාවක්. මොකද අද නගරාසන්න ප්‍රදේශවල ඉංග්‍රීසි ගොඩක් භාවිතා වෙනවා. ඒ වුණත් අවසනාවකට අද ගම්වල ඉංග්‍රීසි භාවිතා වෙන්නේ නැහැ.
The Youth Force movement of Sri Lanka have a main focus in visiting various villages across Sri Lanka, and we also conduct various educational programs to uplift the educational level of the children in these villages. And also we build up libraries for them to develop more and more English skills.
Donate, support, and join. Thank you for watching this video.
Welcome everyone to Time to Burn, Stories of Maritime Disasters in Sri Lanka. Youth Force Sri Lanka has had the goal to educate people for the longest time. And this is one of the new ventures that we are planning to take in order to educate the people of Sri Lanka. Today, we have Mr. Dharshana Jayawardena joining us to educate us on the maritime disasters that happened very recently in Sri Lanka. Mr. Dharshana is a very famous leading shipwreck explorer and an underwater photographer and videographer in Sri Lanka. He has over 12 years of experience in terms of scuba diving, and has lodged over 1,200 dives. He is also the author of an amazing book called Ghosts of the Deep. And this book recounts the stories and history of more than 40 of Sri Lanka's individual wrecks. He also discovered Sri Lanka's first underwater cave system and solved the mystery origins of several vessels. And these vessels include 2 World War I vessels and 1 World War II aircraft, which was lost in the Indian Ocean. In 2019, he was recognized as the Asian Explorer of the Year by ADEX, which is a really internationally renowned scuba convention. Having said that, we will also be having a Q&A session at the end of the lecture today. So if anybody has any questions regarding the presentation or diving in general, feel free to drop them in the chat box, and I will be reading them out loud for Mr. Dharshana to answer these questions after his presentation. Having said that, I would now like to invite Mr. Dharshana to present his presentation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sairi. Okay, so let me just share this screen. Okay, tell me if you can see the screen.
Yeah, we can see the screen.
Okay, great. So thank you very much for inviting me to talk today. And I should also thank you for all the good work you are doing. Really great. And I'm happy to speak to you. So I think right now there's a lot of interest in shipwrecks for the wrong reasons. And you know why it is. It's about the Express Pearl shipwreck that burned for some time and also got wrecked. So this presentation really is about to tell you that this is not a unique incident. It might have been the biggest incident so far, and it got such a lot of public attention. But ships at sea has always been in danger, and especially by fire, right? So that's why I put this very quite morbid heading, "Time to Burn," and I will talk to you about some of the maritime disasters in Sri Lanka. So I will tell you about, as a diver, what I think would be the impacts of this disaster is. And I will also talk to you about some of the maritime disasters and actually what causes a maritime disaster. What happens? Why do we get incidents like this? How common are they? Has it happened before, right? So that's the first part. And then if I have a little bit of time, I'm going to move into a kind of different section of the presentation, more from a shipwreck detective standpoint, but it's still related to the topic we are talking about today. It's about a mystery relating to a ship that caught fire and sank, right? So I will, depending on the time I have, I will lengthen and shorten that second part. But my primary focus will be to talk to you about the first part, which is about the maritime disasters and the history of it. So today we have the largest shipwreck in Sri Lanka, right? It's born because the Express Pearl is the very largest shipwreck. And as you see, this is a picture of it just before it sank. You can see the damage that the fire has caused. And I'm sure you would have seen hundreds of these pictures online, so I'm not going to dwell much on that. And here's a picture of the ship after it sank. Well, almost sank. Now it's actually sunk further. The bow also has gone and touched the seabed. It rests at 21 meters of depth of Kapungud. I'll show you a map in due course. So if you put this ship in front of town hall, just to give you a perspective of the size, of course it can't be done, but if it was, just imagine you are at town hall and you look towards the road and you see this massive ship towering over the town hall, right? So it's incredibly large. In fact, it's larger than the largest shipwreck we had so far, and that's the HMS Hermes. And I don't know whether you heard about that. That's the world's first purpose-designed aircraft carrier. Yes, Sri Lanka does have an aircraft carrier, even though it's underwater. It's at 53 meters deep. And it was sunk during the World War II when the Japanese Navy attacked Sri Lanka, Colombo, and then after that attacked Trinco. And a whole fleet of ships sank, creating a World War II wreck, series of wrecks in the East Coast, right? Very interesting to dive, one of the best in the world. And actually, from a wreck diver standpoint, technical diver standpoint, Sri Lanka is actually known for the Hermes. So if you ask a diver, tell a diver that you come from Sri Lanka, they say, isn't that where the Hermes is, right? So it's one of the most, actually, it's one of the top 100 wrecks in the world to dive from a diver's experience. So here's where the Express Pearl is, approximately about 9 kilometers west of Kapungud. And so some of the concerns that a lot of people are asking me and a lot of people have is the damage caused by this incident, right? So you already know about the plastic nurdles. Then people ask me, okay, when this ship sank, will it come and rest on reefs? Will it damage the reefs? What will happen if there's a fuel spill? What's the impact of chemicals, right? So I'll briefly touch on those. And I think you would have already heard a lot from social media, from news, and you have a fair idea, right? But so here is where I will give my points as a diver on how we should look at this damage. So here are the nurdles, and these are low density polyethylene, so used to manufacture large plastic goods. And they look quite pretty. Unfortunately, they are quite deadly, right? And thanks to our forces, the Navy, Air Force, the Army, they did an amazing job cleaning up the ocean. I mean, I was told that they clean it up, and in the next day there's another tsunami of nurdles stacked up, right? So they worked tirelessly for the last few weeks, managed to keep our beaches clean. I'm sure we have to do this on an ongoing basis. But having said that, now we know there's a lot of plastic damage from these nurdles. This is just to put things in context about it in the whole world. This is a beach in Indonesia, and you can see it's full of plastic bottles, right? So in addition to incidents like the Pearl, as human beings, we are already destroying the world's ocean with plastic. And I'm not saying in Sri Lanka we have such a bad situation, but when I go diving, when I'm out there in the sea, especially after a heavy rain, I have seen rivers of plastic bottles, plastic parts of televisions, fans, all sorts of strange things. It's almost like a river of plastic flowing off the river Kalani and then going into the ocean and going into deep sea. It's not coming back. So once we did a beach cleanup in Crow Island, it was amazingly, almost like this with plastic lighters, all sorts of plastic. And in the East Coast, if you go to the East Coast, I've noticed it's full of microplastics. So while we are worried about the impact of express pearl and the nurdles, we should also keep in mind that equal amount of destruction is being done, spread over time, spread over space all around Sri Lanka, all around the world. So the second question people ask me, so what will happen to the reefs and the wrecks in the area? So this is just a rough map of the reefs and the wrecks. You can see that there's quite a bit of activity there. There are so many reefs and wrecks. So will this damage the reefs, right? Will the ship go and land on a reef and will it just flatten out the reef? So where this express pearl is actually where the out anchorage is. So out anchorage is the place where when ships come to Sri Lanka out of the Colombo port, they will anchor there until they are given clearance to come to port, right? For various reasons. Maybe there's not space, maybe some other reason. So here there's a lot of ships anchoring. Now the results of ships anchoring in this area actually leads to quite a bit of damage. Why? Because this area is a rubber rocky reef. So this picture, in fact, I took in during 2011 because I was doing an investigation on ship anchor damage on these reefs during that time, and I encountered this massive stingray. Right, so there are creatures living here, even though it looks like it doesn't look like a very, those coral reefs we see in TV, colorful with fish fluttering. This rubble zone is actually home to large creatures and then small creatures as well. So here what I found, because actually fishermen told me that this is happening because of the anchorage, is that these large ship anchors, I don't know if they have seen this anchor, they are massive, right? I mean, they're the size of a car, large car really. And when you anchor, obviously your anchor has to hit the sea floor to hook on something. And until it does, it can drag for even sometimes kilometers. And for other reasons also, so you can see they're like highways on the reef. And you can see this whole coral domes actually split apart by the anchors, right? So my view is
either you tell me or either you go. Wrong thing is
I'm not at all worried about a ship coming to rest on a reef, because anyway that area is getting damaged because of anchorage. So it's not something we should worry about. That's the least of the worries of the damage caused by express pearl. Then about oil spill, I think you must have seen this incident in Mauritius, right, where this massive oil tanker ran aground and caused a huge amount of spill. So ships generally they use this fuel oil, heavy fuel oil, to run their engines. And if you look at, I'm just very fast in a very quick way, I'm going to give you an idea about the ship's construction. So some ships are called single hull. They just have the single shell. For additional safety, especially in oil tankers and in some container ships, they create these two hulls. And the idea there is, if there's a low impact, it will not breach the ship so that it will sink, or the cargo or the oil will not spill over, right? So that's called a double. So there's single hull, there's double bottom, then there's a double hull, which is the best construction. And all the large oil tankers have to have a double hull according to standards. So for example, this is just an example of a ship called the Napoli, and this is where the fuel oils are stored. And if you look at the cross section, you can see that they actually use the space between the double hull to store fuel, which is kind of dangerous if you think about it, right? So the whole purpose of having a double hull is I would think is lost if you do that. They also use this space to fill it with water as ballast to balance the ship. If the ship doesn't have cargo, it kind of raises up, it becomes unstable. So you fill those spaces with water so that it sinks to the bottom, right? And then this is what happened to the Napoli in the English Channel. Because of heavy seas, the hull actually cracked, and there was oil leak from the very side where the oil tanks were, unfortunately. And here, just for your idea, where the engines are, and you can see a ship of this magnitude, the engines are massive, right? I mean, it's indescribably massive. And this is where the exhaust fumes go up of the funnel out into air. So the ships itself, like all the traffic of the ships in the world, obviously that's causing pollution as well. But I mean, we can't help it. The world commerce will collapse if we don't have cargo ships going around. It's become we are so dependent on it. So right now, the concern is, will there be an oil spill? And right at Express Pearl, there's a company called Oil Spill Response. They're also the official salvors. They are monitoring the situation. And right now, there are so many theories. The fuel oil has burnt out. Some of it's leaking. There have been satellite pictures of people claiming that it's the oil spill. And the experts say, no, that's not the oil spill. That's sodium hydroxide. So I really don't know what's happening. But I think overall, oil is contained or burnt off. But what will happen if there's oil spill? So you can, we actually, as a country, we have about 3 kilometers of booms. You can circle those, the oil spill, so that the oil spill is contained within those booms, so it doesn't go out. So as soon as you detect oil spill, you can circle the wreck with these booms. Then you can use these special type of sponges, and that can help absorb the spill. And I just saw an article posted about the University of Tehran developing a graphite sponge, which can actually help absorb the oil. So there are various types of technologies. Then you can use biological agents to break down the oil if it reaches the shore, right? So bacteria, cyanobacteria, etc. Green algae, you can use those are techniques. You can also use chemical dispersants. Using a plane, you can spray the oil slick with chemicals. It will break it down, and unfortunately, it will sink into the ocean. So it's not the best solution, but you can at least get rid of that huge thick oil slick, and it will help to disperse the oil faster. Then you can do something called controlled burning, right? So when you got the oil covered in the booms or surrounded in the booms, you can actually do a controlled burning to get rid of the oil, and it's called in situ burning. And then you can use special devices called skimmers. Another question I get asked a lot is, so why don't we go to the Express Pearl and why don't we just siphon off the oil? Yes, it's possible. There are technologies, and this company called Miko Marine, they have this device called the Mosquito. So it's named after obviously the mosquito who comes and jabs us and just siphons off our blood, right? So same technology really, and then it'll you can take the oil out of shipwrecks even at depths of 130 meters. So the good thing about the Express Pearl is it's shallow. It'll be easy job to get the oil off. And the complexity of doing that, as I said, will depend on the depth, the state of the wreck, the roughness of the sea. And this oil, the fuel oil is actually very thick. So sometimes you have to steam it to warm it up to make it less viscous and to pump it out. Especially in cold weather, it tends to become like tar, I'm told. So actually one of the problems that you might be interested to know, while shipwrecks can in one way be really good for the economy, like especially the old shipwrecks, because they've settled down, they have been converted to artificial reefs. There are a lot of fish in it. They've become, like a whole ecosystem of its own. Some of them can be ticking time bombs, ecological time bombs. Why? Because if a ship sinks, now World War II created a huge amount of shipwrecks. So if a ship sinks with the oil intact, trapped inside, and it goes, let's say, deep inside to like 50 meters, it's trapped inside, right? So now over the years, over 100 years, maybe 70, 80, 90, 100 years, the ship slowly deteriorates. And at some point, this fuel can leak out. So now it's becoming a worldwide problem in some areas because some of those World War II wrecks actually sank with the fuel oil trapped in it. So now the scientists are developing various means of detecting this and also extracting the fuel oil out of it. So it's a ticking time bomb. As far as I know, in Sri Lanka, we don't have this problem yet. So that's good news. Then we have the hazardous chemical damage, right? So I think you know that there's nitric acid, there's sodium dioxide. These are I think the most hazardous types of chemicals that Express Pearl had. 81 containers of toxic materials and containers. So the interesting thing is, while they are hazardous, it's not illegal to transport them. So a lot of people talk about like almost it's a crime that the ship had nitric acid, this ship had sodium dioxide and other chemicals. No, these are used in industry, right? So the commerce in the world has to happen, and these chemicals are needed. So then nothing wrong with it. But the thing is, the question is, have they been stored to standard? That's where the real question is. So what scientists are saying is this will not have that much of impact because once mixed with seawater, it will disperse eventually. But at the time of dispersion, it might affect marine life. So again, to put things in context, we also personally can be like a ship full of chemicals if you are using sunscreen. I don't know whether you know about it, but every time we apply sunscreen, we introduce all these harmful chemicals that can destroy corals and fish life over a period of years, right? So it's something you need to think about. Avoid sunscreen with these chemicals. Actually, avoid sunscreens for the most part, and try and use ultraviolet protection factor sunwear. So there are clothes that you can wear that can protect you from the sun, right? So you have to be very careful using sunscreen. So every time you use sunscreen and get in the sea, in minutes, it might just wash off, right? So we are basically poisoning the ocean with our own activities, even though we don't think of it much. I mean, I haven't done it, but I've stopped using it now because I never thought that sunscreen can be harmful for the corals. So another question is it safe to eat fish? Well, I don't know. There are so many conflicting thoughts, and but what we are observing is now, the story of 30 turtles showing up dead, dolphins showing up dead. So something is poisoning the fish out there, right? So personally, my opinion is I actually would like to keep away from eating fish. And if you haven't watched this documentary, just have a look. It's actually I think it's very mind-blowing ceasefire about the fishing industry and how the fact that our need for fish is destroying the world's ocean. And it basically says there's nothing called sustainable fishing because the size of the problem is the demand is so high, you can't have sustainable fishing. So watch this movie or the documentary. And my view is, okay, so we should reduce eating fish. So if I'm eating fish, let's say once a week, I should reduce it to twice a week. That's my personal goal. And I'm sticking to it quite well, actually. I think now is the best time to not eat fish for maybe a month or so, just not for anything else, but to give the ocean a break, right? So that's my personal way. But you need to decide whether it's safe to eat or not, and go ahead. And also bioaccumulation is the fact that now scientists are saying, even for this incident, that even the small amounts of toxins that might go into small fish will be eaten by larger fish. So it accumulates upward the food chain. And the bigger fish like tuna might have toxins, in a few, even few years later. So the damage done by some of the chemicals can be passed down. Even though it disperses quickly, it can bioaccumulate. Anyway, bioaccumulation happens right now with all sorts of toxins we are dumping into the ocean anyway, right? So eating larger fish is actually quite unsafe. It's better to eat smaller fish is what I'm told. But I'm not a marine biologist, so just verify that before you make any decisions. Okay, so what really happened? Fire on board, right? We don't know really what really happened. I mean, there's so much speculation, how this fire started and all that. But for certainty, I can tell you it happened because of the triangle of doom. So what is this triangle of doom? So when it comes to maritime accident investigation, right, the first thing the investigators will do is try and establish a timeline. When did what happen? It's very important. It's done in aircraft accident investigation, maritime investigation. So you have all sorts of events from the time the ship launches to, I'm not going into details, right? So you basically build a timeline on, okay, when did these things happen? Including to the point where, okay, we recovered the voyage data recorder, which will be really helpful to get more information. So, for example, one of the key events is we know that the ship originated from Qatar, went to India, and for some reason turned back to Sri Lanka, right? So to that point, and then we have a lot of questions. So what's exactly in the cargo? How was it stored? Where was the point of origin? And one of the interesting points is over here. Did the crew know that there was a nitric acid leak before coming to Colombo, even before going to India? Right, so all of these things have to be very forensically, very to the minute detail understood. So it's a huge investigation. And there are several conventions in the world when it comes to shipping. So there's this concept called a flag of convenience. And unfortunately, Sri Lanka is also listed as a country with flag of convenience. What it means is, if you want to register a ship as an owner, you might be living in, let's say you're living in Australia, right? You actually come to Sri Lanka and register it under Sri Lankan flag. And the reason is the standards and the regulations of all these flag of convenience countries is relaxed on safety and various other standards, so that it's easier to actually register a ship. So that's why you hear lots of ships are registered in Ukraine or so here are the countries, right, of flag of convenience. Some of the countries like Honduras, you've heard of Panama. Okay, so all that is the owners are kind of going around, working their way around the high cost of high standards. And then there are so many conventions. So these conventions impose standards like SOLAS, safety of life at sea, and various other things. Unfortunately, Sri Lanka is only part to one or two conventions. So this will also affect our ability to claim compensation from the extraterrestrial incident, I'm told. So just do some research about it. It's very interesting. The shipping industry is such a big monster and so many complications. So fire has been a reason for ages, right? Ships have been burning from the time you had the sail ships. So most of the time, it's not the cause. Fire is not the cause that actually makes a ship sink. It's the final destroy, the final reason that the ship sinks, but it's not the origin of the disaster. So the origin of a fire happens if these three conditions are met. I think you know about this, the fire triangle. Just having oxygen will not be dangerous. You need heat and some sort of fuel to incite a chemical reaction, right? So in a ship, the mariners take extreme care to make sure this fire triangle doesn't happen. Because imagine you are in the middle of the ocean, you're trapped in that vessel, and imagine a fire. So where do you go, right? So that's the biggest thing. And you can get trapped inside the ship while there's fire. So there's extreme amount of effort and standards to make sure that fire doesn't happen. So this is very important. So another triangle of doom happens. Ship has a couple of high risk areas. The galley or the kitchen, engine compartments, electrical circuits in modern ships are always prone to fire, right? So it's a big issue with shipping, even in airlines, electrical circuit fires. Then of course the cargo in the holds. Then there are high risk materials, right? Now when you construct a ship, you have to avoid using flammable material. Some boats do use wood and fiberglass, it's still flammable. Then there's so much oil, fuel, grime build up in a ship. It's very risky. They can cause fires. Then there are machines, right? Fishing vessels can have machines. Various types of construction can be going in the ship, so that has exhaust gases that creates heat. Then very interestingly, there's bacteria buildup also can create heat. So one of the things that the shipping industry actually takes care of is it makes sure that the rags that you use to clean is disposed of properly. If you have rags lying around, they can actually create a bacteria growth which can create heat and then cause a burn or a fire. Even in a trash can, right? So trash cans can actually ignite because of this bacteria. Then also chemicals and other unstable cargo, which as you saw in express burn. Then you have the human factors, right? The negligence, did you pack the chemicals correctly? Incompetence, if there's a fire, did you respond to it correctly? And then malice, did you purposefully create this accident, right? So that's another triangle of doom, why these maritime accidents happen. Then you have weather. Unfortunately, during this accident, we also had a tropical cyclone, which is like a really bad thing to happen when we have one disaster. It's actually the reason I think the Express Pearl incident became so big is because Yas was creating huge winds, 25 knot winds, huge swells, and it was hard to do firefighting. And in fact, the winds actually fueled the flames. Because of the wind, the fire was getting more oxygen, and the flames started burning faster, right? So bad combination. Okay, have you heard of rogue waves? So another reason for maritime disasters is this concept called a rogue wave. This is not actual picture. This is my very amateur attempt at Photoshop. But a wave like this, maybe not as large in relation to this huge ship, which is the Express Pearl, can actually happen in the ocean. Initially, it was supposed to be a myth. Seafarers were telling about these massive waves that suddenly showed up from nowhere and then disappeared, almost as if there was nothing, right? And it was considered very rare. Then, in 1995, in a North Sea oil rig, they recorded a massive wave, 25.6 meters, which suddenly popped out of nowhere. So that was the kind of actual solid proof that these rogue waves can happen. So the definition of a rogue wave is it should be about 2 times as high as a standard significant wave. So statistically, a standard significant wave is about 60% higher than any of the other waves, and a rogue wave is twice the height of that wave. So you can see the spike, right? It's like if you take this wave, the highest wave is twice. So after that, lots of scientists did various types of measurements, satellite, ocean radar, and they confirmed the presence of rogue waves. So the thing about rogue waves is we know that they are large. And unfortunately, we really don't know what the reasons are. It's thought to be high winds and strong currents, a combination of high winds happening during a time of strong currents. However, some people have had incidents when the sea is absolutely calm. So there seems to be a current and a sudden gust of wind that creates a rogue wave. And not all rogue waves are 30-meter waves, right? So imagine you are in a small fishing boat, the rogue wave can be maybe 10 feet. In relation to the current condition, the rogue wave is a wave that's unusually high. So rogue waves can cause a lot of maritime disasters, and this one of the major incidents is this oil tank which disappeared in 1978. It's thought to be a victim of one or multiple rogue waves. It's very interesting. So there are countless examples of maritime disasters. I have these 2 dictionaries, 10,000 shipwrecks in the world, and they cover ships that sunk during 1824 to 1962. And for all sorts of reasons, right? Very interesting. So you might have seen this infograph from Roe, which outlines a couple of maritime incidents. And one of the first major large-scale oil spills was this MV Melishka. So it had all sorts of fertilizer and fuel oil, right, in Gundala. Then we had the Aman Shah, which sank in 2007. And again, that created an oil spill that 30 kilometers of coast was affected. And this actually is the deepest known wreck in Sri Lanka right now. When I say deepest, the deepest diveable wreck. I haven't been able to dive it because I haven't really found the location yet. And then you have the Grandpa with sulfuric acid. It was taken away and sunk. You must have seen the shipwreck that's in Rumasaka, right? It's almost beached. So that was another disaster. Fortunately, the fuel was extracted before there could be leak. The new diamond actually happened last year. It was quite a newsworthy event. Fortunately, it didn't end up as a huge disaster, but again, there's a bit of controversy because even though we got compensated for the effort we did to stifle the fire, we were not compensated for the environmental damage. So the question is, why didn't we arrest the vessel and detain it? Why was it let go? Now we may not be able to get that compensation. So that's a bit of an issue there. And then the Eurosun was also last year. This was not very famous, but I was in a couple of meetings with some of the government organizations. We wanted to go and do a survey on the reef damage. The Eurosun went and ran aground on a shallow reef called the Little Basas. So the Great Basas and the Little Basas are one of the most interesting reefs in Sri Lanka. And fortunately, the captain managed to reverse the engines and take it out. So a great disaster was averted. Okay, so then there are some unmentioned shipwrecks which I have added to the list. I'm not going to go through one by one. I will just go through two of them. And now I'm kind of going undersea from this point onwards, right? So right now I've been staying on the surface. So I'm gradually going to go underwater. This wreck is the Chief Dragon, and it also sank because of a fire, but it actually caught fire in Gaul. But the Navy or the Ports Authority managed to tow it to Colombo, where it sank. It's a great shipwreck, 30 meters. You can see now it's converted to an artificial reef with fish and all sorts of marine life, right? So it's a really great wreck, very popular. Then you must also know the Thermopylae Sierra, which is off Lunava. From the shore, you should be able to see the mast. It's still coming out. I actually took this picture in 2012 when it was sinking. And the reason is now, you know that I look for shipwrecks. So in this instance, my boatman called me and said, listen, the ship is going to sink today. And I said, okay, I'm going to come because I actually want to take the GPS location of this ship because I thought it's going to just disappear into the ocean forever and no one is going to see it again. So I wanted to know the GPS location so that I can dive it. But what happened is it actually sank. The seabed was so shallow at 23 meters. The masts are still over the ocean. So I really didn't have to do it, but it's now visible for miles. Unfortunately, this wreck, which is now an artificial reef with full of fish, it's one of the best places to see whale sharks in Colombo during season. If you're lucky, of course. I'm not saying whale sharks come there every day, but whale sharks are reported almost every week during season in this wreck. And it's very popular because it's from 0 meters to 23 meters. Lots of new divers come there to learn about scuba diving, learn about wreck diving. And right now, I'm hearing, and we're actually very concerned that there's a move to salvage this, destroy this artificial reef and salvage it for metal. So we are trying to stop it and create awareness. So you can see how much fish has aggregated in just in a few years, right? So it's amazing how now I've seen so many ships after they sink, within weeks and months and years, fish just start to come and aggregate in these sites. So this was, I think, about maybe a year after the ship sank. A whale shark, picture of a whale shark at the Sierra, a frame from a video, so that's why it's not very clear. Okay, so that was the first part, and let's look at the time. Yeah, so we're not too bad. I think I've got about 5 minutes more, so I'm not going to dwell too much about it. But this is a bit of a mystery. So as you know, I am an underwater explorer. So what I do is I look for new shipwrecks, right? And then try to understand where they come from. I try to identify possible candidates for a shipwreck, and then try to do research and figure out, okay, what is the identity? So one of the, I think, achievements I have done is I identified 2 World War I wrecks in about 16 kilometers off Mount and 17 kilometers of Modara, and I found the bells, which I handed it over to the Maritime Archaeological Unit. Then I found a World War II plane and did a whole investigative, actually it was an air crash investigation where I tried to figure out, okay, what is this crash site of an aircraft? And then I figured out the story behind it. And of course, I do cave diving whenever possible. So far, I've only found the largest underwater cave system in Narela. So the reason I told you that is in 2013, this person called Olaf Rasting, he wrote to me on email, and he told me a story about this shipwreck called the MV Trikulo. He said it's a Norwegian, he's from Norway, and it sank in January 1931, right? And he said it's sunk 4 miles off Colombo, but that's what he said. He was not right anyway. So the reason he was interested in shipwreck is his great grandfather was the captain of the shipwreck, and his name was Arthur Johan Wold, and his daughter was Olaf's grandmother. So Karin was Olaf's grandmother, right? So he has a family interest. So what had happened to this ship was so this ship also had left Colombo. It had carried chemicals, so very similar to the Express Pearl. And within about 3 hours after it sailing Colombo, there had been terrible explosions and a massive chemical fire. So you can see the parallel between a chemical fire that happened in 1931 and a chemical fire that happened last couple of weeks ago, right? It's almost like this billowing smoke, dark black smoke, but these explosions were so bad that the ship sank in 5 minutes. But fortunately, since the fire started earlier, most of the crew managed to get out, except the captain and a few others. So 6 people died, but others managed to get out. You can see the lifeboat. This was actually taken by a French steamer called Porthos. It was sailing by, it heard this massive explosion, took these pictures, obviously on the way to trying to provide assistance to the people who were in trouble. Article that ran on the Norwegian papers. So Olaf was interested in knowing, okay, where was this ship? So he's asking me, do you know where my great grandfather's ship is? So that was a bit strange. I think one of the strangest questions people had asked me. I mean, your friends would ask me, right? Okay, have you seen my car keys? Do you know where my wallet is? But no one has asked me, do you know where my great grandfather's ship is? Anyway, to cut a long story short, because we are running out of time, is that in 2009 I had dived a mystery wreck in Beirut. At that time it was the deepest known shipwreck at 55 to 65 meters. Again, a beautiful artificial reef, and it's really deep, so it's very complicated. So you need technical diving skills and carry multiple tanks, multiple gases. So this is a picture of me coming up from a dive like that. And it's you spend 20 minutes at the wreck and it takes about 1.5 hours to come up because of a condition called decompression. So anyway, I'm going to kind of skip through these slides because we're out of time. But basically, this was a process where I did a lot of research and found out that the shipwreck I had dived in 2009 was actually the shipwreck that Olaf's grandfather had served. And there were a couple of reasons: the location, the key features in the wreck and the ship, the location of the engines and the type of engines, and also artifacts, which I found this fragment of a plate, which is from an old Norwegian plate manufacturer. So that proved that the ship actually had a Norwegian origin, but I haven't still been able to pinpoint it by finding the bell and other artifacts which can give conclusive proof. Right, so this is the type of shipwreck investigation I do, where I have to spend a lot of time when I find a new wreck to figure out where it came from, why did it sink, what happened to the wreck, and can I positively ID that this is actually the wreck that has a certain name and a port of origin. Okay, so the question is, can another maritime disaster happen? I'm not going to answer the question. I'm going to leave you with this image. Any given day, any given time, this is the amount of shipwreck traffic around Sri Lanka. So you can decide whether there will be another accident in the near future. So I have an Instagram account, Tech Diving Sri Lanka, if you want to follow my adventures. And then my book, Ghost of the Deep, also has similar stories to what I just told you at the last bit about the Norwegian ship and the World War I wrecks, etc. It's in the book. But that's it. And I think we can conclude it right on time, more or less. So I can take questions now. If there are any.
Thank you so much, sir. We certainly learned a lot from the presentation, and we do have a couple of questions. So the first question is, what factors are taken into account before deciding to drag a burning ship to deeper waters?
Okay, it's a very good question, and I think a decision like that is indeed a very, very grave decision. I think the most important thing is to consult the correct people when you do something like that, because it's about, I think, talking to pilots. When I say pilot, those are the captains who actually pilot the ship. Talk to marine engineers, understand what sort of state the ship is in. Is it already taking in fuel? Understand the conditions of the ocean. Understand the power of the ship that's actually towing. How much, what sort of progress can we make? So I think it's a very complicated decision, and I think the question here is, was it made lightly, or was it made after considering all those facts, and was it an informed decision? And if so, fine. I mean, you always make mistakes, right? So but yes. So good question. So many factors to consider.
Thank you, sir. And the next question is, if the excess pearl sinks, will it turn into an artificial home for wildlife within a short period of time, or will it take around 2 years, as did the previous ones?
Yes. So it will turn to an artificial reef instantly. If you saw the Navy divers videos, you can also already see fish aggregating around it, despite the fact that it's a hazardous location. Maybe the acid is still leaking in, all sorts of toxic chemicals and residue are leaking into the ocean. Yet fish are aggregating because they feel, okay, there's shadow there, I can maybe hide there, I can eat there, right? So fish love stuff like that because the ocean is actually quite empty. It's just a barren ocean of sand. And when there's something falling in, some fish comes and just makes it its home. So if this is cleaned up to a certain extent, in a few months there will be a lot of fish aggregating it already.
Thank you for that, sir. And those are all the questions that were imposed in the chat box. There's one more question. What mechanics are there to clean up the poisonous debris from the seabed, the stuff that did not wash ashore?
That's going to be an extreme challenge because you can't scoop things out of the seabed because there's a reef, right? There's a reef, there might be coral, so you can't just troll or clean the seabed. Whereas on the beach, you can use some of those machines that can actually scoop the sand and the debris and then filter the debris out. But in the ocean, unfortunately, if it settles down at the bottom, it's very hard to clean. And only two ways I can think of is actually human power, divers going in and do the cleanup, or using some sort of underwater rovers to do it. But it's not going to be easy. And hopefully that doesn't happen in this case.
Thank you for that, sir. Are there any other questions to be asked? Seeing none, we can now conclude the Q&A session. Oh, sorry, there's one more. So the microplastics are here to stay.
Sorry, say again, sorry?
The microplastics are here to stay?
Yes.
We cannot get rid of them? Yes.
Unfortunately, yes.
Those are all the questions for now. And we now end the Q&A session. And before we conclude today's session, I would now like to call upon our president, Niven, to speak a few words. Over to you, Niven.
Sorry, I think there's another question. We should probably answer that and then get on to the Q&A.
To whom do the wrecks legally belong to? Is the last question.
Absolutely great question. So it's a process. I see it as a threefold process. So the ship and the cargo belongs to the ship's owner and the cargo owners. When it sinks, the ship's owner and the cargo owner might try to salvage some of the cargo to cover their expenses. If they don't and they directly claim insurance, then the insurance company owns the shipwreck. They may choose to salvage it to cover some of their insurance costs. If they don't, or if they do and at least a partial wreck or the complete wreck remains, it goes to the director merchant shipping. And that person is called the receiver of wrecks. So the director merchant shipping is in the merchant shipping navy. It's a government organization. And all the wrecks are received by him. So he's the receiver of wrecks and the director merchant shipping. So who owns the wreck? The people of Sri Lanka. So we do, right? So that's why if there's a wreck, if we own it, the people, you and me, then we have a right to protest if it's being salvaged for iron and artificial reef is being destroyed.
Okay, sir. Since that is the last question, I would now like to invite Niven, our president, to speak a few words. Over to you, Niven.
Thank you very much, Sai. Thank you very much, Uncle Dharshana, for today's lecture. You've truly been an inspiration for me and many more new divers. You've educated us today about environmental damage that shipwrecks have caused. I also would like to thank today's organizers, Sai and Madhu, for hosting today's event. Finally, I would like to thank everyone for joining in for today's meeting through Zoom and Facebook. You could follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more information about future lectures. That concludes our first public lecture. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.